What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I'm here today. So Sunday is obviously the game against the Redskins. Tomorrow is Saturday. I will be doing my preview video for that game tomorrow. Today I'm doing, I just want to give you some more injury information. It's actually not looking so good in that regard. Overall, there is some good news, but most of it's kind of not good news, so we'll look at that in a minute. But also I do want to continue this discussion about what is a real Dolphins fan, and I love it. I'm doing it for a couple reasons. One, because it is a major theme with this whole thing going on with the team and tanking and so on and so forth, and also because I have to admit it is actually quite fun talking about stuff like this, because it triggers all of these super sensitive snowflakes that get all butthurt because they get called out for being a fan who actually wants their team to lose. So anyway, let me get into it. There's this article on Dolphins Wire from Kyle Krabs. The majority of the time this dude just makes absolutely no sense and is ridiculous, right? There are some people like Kyle Krabs, I disagree with him almost all the time. Guys like Adam Beasley, I agree with him more often than not, right? Omar Kelly, sometimes I agree with him, sometimes I don't. He's very contradictory. He goes back and forth. So, there's variance, right? There's gradients there. Just like with the other Dolphins YouTubers. I tend to agree with K-Flexin the most. Dougly Do Wrong, is kind of the intermediate, and TD's kind of on the other side of the spectrum. So, as far as I'm concerned. So, it just depends. But I do like putting out different perspectives. So, because I don't like to be biased, and I like to make sure to give you the different perspectives from all of these different people, and then I just give you my perspective in response. So, well, let's continue though. He wrote this article. No, you're not a bad fan if you're rooting for Dolphins losses in 2019. I mean, the article title says it all. Like, really, bro? Like, so you're not a bad fan if you root for your team to lose. Like, how idiotic is that? Like, how stupid do you really have to be to believe something like that? That is the exact opposite of what a fan is. Okay? So, let's see. Okay. So, and by the way, I pulled up some definitions here to help you guys along, those that are having trouble with it. So, as per the dictionary, the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines a fan as a very enthusiastic supporter or admirer, right? Now, while it doesn't explicitly say in there that you would, because it's not necessarily, it's a generalized definition that doesn't include things that you are like a fan of in the sense of like sports teams that involves winning, right? Like, because you could be, it could be a very enthusiastic supporter of, whatever, just a songwriter that you like, but they're not necessarily winning in anything, right? So it doesn't say explicitly in their win, but when you apply it in the context of like a sports team, clearly a fan is an enthusiastic supporter and admirer, and they want their team to win, right? Now there might be those out there argue, okay, we want them to win in the long term, and we only accept them losing now. Okay, but you're still accepting and want them and root for them to lose now. So now's the only thing that's important, because the future is not here yet, unless you've somehow figured out a way to, time travel. I haven't. I'm not aware of it. So unless you figure that out, right now is all that matters. And right now, you want your team to lose. And so no, no enthusiastic supporter or admirer of a sports team whose entire goal as a sports team is to win versus their opponents. It just makes no logical sense. Anyway, let's actually get into the article though. Miami Dolphins linebacker Jerome Baker had some pretty choice words for Dolphins fans who have bought into the idea of tank for Tua this week, suggesting that anyone who has been rooting for Miami to drop games and help its draft positioning for the 2020 NFL offseason are not real fans of the team. I completely agree. You're not a real fan if you're rooting for us to lose, no matter what the reason is. And that's as far as it should go, because that's a fact. You're not a fan if you actively root for your team to lose. It doesn't matter what the justification is. You can say, oh yeah, but we're going to be awesome later, which again, there is absolutely no evidence to suggest that an NFL franchise can do what we are doing, especially to the degree that we are doing it, and then at some point become legitimate and have success. And for that matter, even sustain success. The Browns are having a miserable time doing it. And, they're supposed to be, I even said it and I was wrong. I thought they were going to be a powerhouse because they did get to that point of massive talent and all this, that, and the other. But look how that's working out. So, it's just laughable. So that's where it should end. But of course it doesn't, right? He went to go on to say some other good stuff or whatever. But of course that's not where the conversation ends for most people. Then they're, but later on. I don't care about later on. And later on is no guarantee of any kind of success whatsoever, let alone sustained success. So that's a gamble I don't want to take at all. But in the here and now, not only are we failing, not only are we losing, but we're doing at a very historic pace. So again, we have the chance. It's not 100% set in stone yet, but we are again fast on pace to be the worst team that ever existed, both offensively and defensively. The worst team ever, point blank, bottom line, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. No way to twist that, color it, or anything. Worst team to ever exist on both sides of the ball simultaneously. Fast on pace to be that. And you're okay with that? Nah, you're not a fan if you're okay with that. He goes on to say, we try to win every chance we get. If we come up short, it's not because we come up short for the future. I've seen the tanking and all that, said Baker. So, that's the end of Baker's quote. Is that true? Should many Dolphins fans across the country look themselves in the mirror and question how much they really care about their favorite team? Kyle Crabb says, no, of course not. I say absolutely. Because then you just don't even understand what it means to be a fan. So, let's see. As a fan, you want to be competitive. You want your team to be competitive. And if you're going out there intentionally losing, which I understand that a lot of people don't believe that this team is doing, and sure, maybe, some of the players are still going out on the field and giving it their all, although I say there's a good argument to make that not all the players are 100% bought in. I think there's a damn good argument to make. But even the ones that are giving it 100% every play, it doesn't matter because this team was built and designed to be as bad as possible. And they are getting very hurt in the meantime, which we will get to later. So it does not look like there are going to be positives going down the road. But compete. So let's look at that. I also pulled the definition of compete. What is the definition of compete? Strive to gain or win something by defeating or establishing superiority over others who are trying to do the same. So as a fan of a sports team who is the sole purpose of that team is to compete, or in other words, to strive to gain or win something by defeating or establishing superiority over others who are trying to do the same. Again, that is the definition from the dictionary. Okay? So, how does it make you a good fan when you actively want and hope and wish for your team whose sole purpose is to compete and to win when you want them to lose? It doesn't. Here, I actually even pulled the definition of tanking. So, the definition of tanking: fail completely, especially at great financial cost. Although the irony there is that it doesn't matter if we're absolutely atrocious or historically bad. Guess what? Stephen Ross still makes so much money. Has he, have they cut ticket prices or concession prices yet? I haven't heard of it. Dolphins fans who are going to these games, who are still in disbelief, right? Tell me, am I wrong about that? Has Stephen Ross said, you know what, I'm going to take it on the chin and I'm going to suffer with you guys by making sure that I cut prices to tickets, to concessions, to merchandise, right? I'm going to make sure that I take a hit with you guys. Has he done that? I don't think he can say he has. So, tank. Fail completely. Fail completely. So anybody that argues that tanking is not the antithesis of competing and what a sports franchise is supposed to do, and anybody who tries to argue that a fan should support anything other than competing is just ridiculous. It's illogical, it's counterintuitive, and it's stupid. It's flat out fucking stupid. Tanking is the antithesis, meaning the exact opposite of competing. This team has been designed from top down. From Stephen Ross telling Brian Flores, I want you to tank this year, to Brian Flores acquiescing to that demand, and subsequently then him in cooperation with Stephen Ross in the front office, Marvin Allen, Reggie McKenzie, and Chris Greer, they have dismantled this team systematically to the point where the guys that are there, they can try their best, but they have been so set up for failure that we are reaping the benefits of all of that. We have been designed to fail. And if you're a fan that supports that, you are not a fan. Baker is understandably frustrated by the lack of support for a team trying its hardest to go out and perform on a weekly basis. So, again, I find it impossible that you could argue that the entire team, the entire roster is bought into this and really giving it 100%. But even if you wanted to go that far and say that all of the players were going out and giving it 100%, it's impossible to argue that the coaches are. And you could even leave out the questionable decisions that they've made, like on field, the bad calls. You could put the bad calls aside. You could use, you could take how they're using players out of position, and you could leave that out of the equation. Although I don't know why you would, because it's super important. But you could leave all of that out, and it's still super obvious that this coaching staff and this front office is not trying to win, because of how they built the team, because their actions speak to the contrary. Okay, so it's not true that this team in its entirety from top down is trying their hardest, and I would say that not even all of the players are out there giving it their all, because they see what mess they're in. And but even if they are, I mean, it's still not good. So, but yeah, Baker definitely has a right to be frustrated, as do all these guys. The prime years of their careers are being wasted. Anyway, he goes on, but remember this, the Dolphins as a team were never supposed to buy into this systemic teardown. Now that's an interesting comment. The Dolphins as a team were never supposed to buy into this systemic teardown. As of when? So all of a sudden, we weren't supposed to buy into this? Because let's remember, first of all, this is a conversation about whether or not you're a good fan for supporting this. But they told us as fans that we need to trust the process. So you're saying now that we were never supposed to buy into that? That all of a sudden we were just supposed, and the fact that they said time and time again and continue to say, no, we're going out there to win every single game this year in 2019. Despite that, we were never supposed to buy into the systemic teardown? That one sentence alone completely contradicts all of the points that he is trying to make. The Dolphins as a team, and subsequently the fans, were never supposed to buy into the systemic teardown. That is the most catastrophic way to go into, anything, whether it's a rebuild, whether it's a tank a rebuild, or just, even if it's not a rebuild, even if it's just, trying out, different faces in the building, right? So you try a new coaching staff and stuff, whatever. Like, I mean, never expected to buy into the systemic teardown, but at least he acknowledges it is systemic. The players are expected to win. The coaches are expected to coach. And players have forever been conditioned to expect the fans in the stands to cheer them on. Now, let's take a look at a couple of those things. The players are expected to win. Yes. Obviously, the players on the field are on the field and they are expected to go out and win. But they are not fully responsible for the outcome. That obviously, but he does say the coaches are expected to coach. So what does that mean? That means, in part, playing your players in the positions that they're best suited for and getting the best 11 guys out on the field. That does not mean purging your entire team across the board of talent, leadership, experience, and production, right? And then, the bad and weird and illogical, mind-boggling calls on top of it, right? So, I mean, the coaching is terrible. And because this team, from the decisions made by the coaching and the front office, was designed to be as inept as possible. So again, the players can only do so much while they're out there. And especially now because they're getting hurt hella. Our stars too. Again, we'll get to that in a minute. But I mean, there's only but so much they can be expected to do when handed the cards that they're handed. So again, even if you say that all of the players are giving it 100%, there's still only but so much they can get. And I mean, it's absurd, right? And then for the fans, yes, we are supposed to support our team unwaveringly, but that doesn't mean that you just have to blindly follow everything that they do and just take their words as gospel and ignore your lying eyes, even though their actions contradict their words, or even buy into, a process that you don't fundamentally agree with, right? That's not what it means to be a fan, to blindly follow. That is not a fan. A fan is that you always support your team no matter what, but then you also have the courage to, when necessary, speak up against the things that you disagree with. And then you can have, discussion and debate on whether or not it is, the right path or the wrong path. And then you allow the facts to dictate whether you're right and can take credit for it, or whether you're wrong and then have to change your position. And so far, I mean, it's pretty obvious where the facts have gone. But this isn't Ohio State, where the Buckeyes lost 5 games in 3 seasons when Baker was on the team. This isn't the University of Alabama, as former Dolphin Minkah Fitzpatrick found out quite quickly. The Tide lost 3 games in 3 seasons with Fitzpatrick on the roster. Yes, and those are championship winning teams. And so yes, as competitors, they want to play for teams that are competing for championships. And when they're told we are intentionally not going to compete, why the fuck would you want to be a part of that? So there's that. But also, yes, okay, but this team intentionally, consciously, through their active choices and decisions, decided to take a team that was stuck in mediocrity, which I agree, I don't want to be there either. I want to actually be like, you know, consistently making it to the postseason and competing for the Super Bowl 100%. But my answer to that is not a systemic teardown and, you know, making us, even if, but, you know, again, this massive gamble manages to work out, in the meantime, making us as bad as we are. Like, that is not acceptable to me. You don't make us atrociously bad to hopefully one day, potentially, possibly, against all odds, make us sustainably good again years down the road. That is not a fair trade-off, and that is not the smart way to go about doing things. And so they were good, you know, Fitzpatrick was good to get out because at least he has a chance. You know, maybe not this year because of the quarterback situation, but when they get, you know, their quarterback situation fixed next year, they have an excellent chance. So they have a down year this year. They have an excellent chance next year to compete for a championship. And they don't have to do this massive teardown because they had one down year or whatever, you know, due to circumstances that they didn't have any control over. And because Mason Rudolph, their backup, got hurt too. Just like the Jets, they've lost a couple quarterbacks along the way. 3, in fact. They've played through 3 quarterbacks. So, you know, shit that's not under their control, right? Anyway, let's continue on. Heck, this isn't Baker's Benedict Bengals high school program either, where there's no such thing as free agency or a draft. You play with what you've got in high school, and fans hope for the best. I mean, comparing those two things, though, are pretty ridiculous. Comparing a high school team to the NFL is pretty absurd when in this context, at the very least. But he does go on. This is the NFL, where the Dolphins have been firmly placed on a treadmill of mediocrity for 2 decades, essentially Baker's entire life. And anyone who has been a Dolphins fan for an extended period of time has gotten wise to the team's ability to sell hope, only to come up heartbreakingly short. But again, that's why it mind boggles me how people can think that this is the answer, right? So look at it from that perspective. He acknowledges, and most Dolphins fans, even the fucking morons who support this bullshit, acknowledge that this team has been inept for the past few decades, which Chris Greer has been a part of all of that time through their scouting department up to where he is now as GM. And so is Stephen Ross through the vast majority of that, right? So the two guys that have, or two of the guys who have the most power and the most decision-making ability have failed through all that time and have led us to mediocrity, right? But we all acknowledge that they have been inept and have stuck us on that treadmill of mediocrity, as he puts it. But then, so your answer is because, right, they're selling hope this year too. You think this year's no different? And the idiots who buy into this and want us to go 0-16 admit that too. Hope for the future. But again, not even close to a guarantee. In fact, the odds are far more likely that it's going to be a miserable failure in the long term as well. And so, only to come up heartbreakingly short. So if you think mediocrity is heartbreakingly short, oh my God. I can't imagine what all these fucking morons are going to be saying and crying when we are 0-16 this year and the worst team that ever existed, when that stain is on our record, and then next year we're not any better. We're almost as bad, maybe marginally better. Maybe we don't break our own records and beat our own failure by just a little bit next year. But then, we're not going to, potentially even see success for a few years down the road. Not to mention, after the 2020 season, there is a distinct possibility that there could be a lockout and we don't even have football at all. Then what? So, I mean, this is just it's absolutely absurd to try and argue that you're a good fan for supporting this bullshit, or any kind of argument for this bullshit to begin with. And then, fucking Jesus Christ. Remember when Joe Philbin's 2013 Dolphins won 3 consecutive games in December to move to 8-6, including a road win in the snow over the Pittsburgh Steelers and a home win over the New England Patriots? How'd that season end? Oh right, with Miami getting embarrassed by a 6-10 Buffalo Bills team, 19-0, and losing at home week 17 to the New York Jets, 20-7. Just one win over either team would have netted the Dolphins a playoff berth, since the 6th seed that season was a 9-7 Chargers team that the Dolphins had beaten 20-16. Okay, let's pause right there. Joe Philbin obviously and clearly was a very inept head coach and failed miserably at doing that. So super terrible coach. And then that was Stephen Ross's decision. So bad decision there on the owner. But let's also note a home win over New England with Ryan Tannehill. So that was one of the home wins that everybody was touting was a reason why we could have beat the New England Patriots at home this year. But as I pointed out, the majority of those wins came with Ryan Tannehill and a at least decent team around him. But in 2013 though, he didn't have much of a team. And so that shows even more how Ryan Tannehill was a great quarterback, because he did help elevate his team to a home win over the New England Patriots, even though his offensive line in 2012 was garbage. And he had, I think in 2012, he had like 40 plus sacks. If I'm not or 2013, excuse me. Like 40 plus sacks. Here, I'll even pull it up right now. But, I mean, it's so mind-boggling, because when people try and make these arguments and then the examples that they give, like, don't even prove their points or prove the opposite of their points. Because what does this prove? That Stephen Ross made a bad decision with Joe Philbin. Joe Philbin was a bad head coach and was inept, and therefore made his team inept. He didn't know how to build a team. He never supported Ryan Tannehill. Let's see. And even with, but he's using the win over the Steelers and the Patriots as, upsides to that season and so on and so forth, and then how we failed in the end. But Ryan Tannehill was part of that on a very super mediocre team at best, but still far more talented than we have now. This is ridiculous. Then he goes on, who remembers Nick Saban's 05 Dolphins, who won 6 consecutive games to finish the season 9-7? Miami had all the momentum in the world and then decided to bet on Dante Culpepper's shredded knee instead of Drew Brees' injured right shoulder. Brees would go on to tear apart the passing records and lead New Orleans Saints to 2 Super Bowls, winning 1. Miami hasn't won a playoff game since the decision was made and Saban was back to college after following season in 2006. But all that proves is more deficiency on Stephen Ross. Who remembers Ricky Williams' abrupt retirement ahead of, and even, because I think Chris Greer was even around then too, but he was, although to be fair, he would definitely have far less blame in that situation, because at that point he was probably just, an up and coming scout in the scouting department or whatever. So, but I'm pretty sure Chris Greer was still, part of the organization. So that's a failure on Stephen Ross, though. That's all that proves. Who remembers Ricky Williams' abrupt retirement ahead of 04 season after touching the ball 872 times over his first 2 seasons with the Dolphins in 02 and 03? His retirement shell-shocked the Dolphins and blew up any hopes of competing. What the fuck does that have to do with anything? That's football. Like, what the fuck do you mean? Like, that doesn't even prove anything. Okay, why is that even in here? That doesn't even make any fucking sense. Who remembers Dan Marino's final game? A 62-7 embarrassment at the hands of the Jacksonville Jaguars. A season which started with so much promise at 7-1 before going 2-6 to finish the season with 22 turnovers during that stretch. Miami turned the ball over 7 times against Jacksonville, and Marino retired with the stench of such a loss lingering over the organization. Okay, I don't really know what that proves, but everybody wants to say that fucking, and I do believe obviously that Dan Marino was a great, but see, he even had terrible games like that. So, like, I mean, in the comparison to, like, Ryan Tannehill saying that he was such a bad quarterback, and then they try and use, the one-off examples like that to say, like, you got to be consistent. So, I mean, by that argument, you should say then that Dan Marino's terrible because he had such an embarrassing loss, and then he ended his career on that. But that would be ridiculous to say. So, like, that's why these points are just stupid. They don't make any fucking sense. Remember all those teams and so many more disappointments? Every Dolphins fan willing to buy into the vision presented by Miami's front office that the future is better. But the future starts in 2020 after a monumental NFL draft and free agency window. Okay, again, so if you think that it was heartbreaking to be mediocre, I don't even know what term you would describe then or use to describe how it would be after a historically bad season. And they're trying to sell you hope. They've been selling you hope. But Stephen Ross, the guy who's been selling you hope for the past couple decades and who's failed miserably at it and has put us on the treadmill of mediocrity, has now decided the right option is to be historically bad to fix us potentially in the future sometime down the line. Who in their right fucking mind thinks that that's the right trend to go in? Like, are you serious? And the future starts in 2020 after a monumental NFL draft and free agency window. Okay. We have a lot of cap space and we have a bunch of picks. None of that guarantees that we get any of those picks correct or that they build this team correctly, prioritize correctly. That doesn't mean that any of the guys that they bring in free agency are going to work out. In fact, the odds are very much stacked against us. And again, the one example we have to use from the NFL that people want to use is the Browns. And they're not doing so hot. And they have said, and a lot of these fucking stupid asses that support this tank bullshit will also say that one of the big problems we had in the past was the big bloated contracts that we had for free agents, and that that they wouldn't want us to spend big in free agency like that. But then they support Chris Greer when he says, oh, but we're going to be big spenders in free agency. Okay. But we don't want that. We don't want to rely on that. Why would you want to rely on that? Why would you want to, spend, especially because then you're going to have to doubly overpay for guys because you're going to have to entice them even more to want to come to this trash. So, I mean, it's just super nonsensical and self-defeating. Anyway. The Dolphins have never seen an offseason opportunity like the one they're currently faced with. But that opportunity came at the expense of 2019. It also came at the expense of next year. If you think that we're going to be any better next year, I mean, if we go 0-16 this year and we win, like, being generous, 2 games next year, we get a 2-game swing and we're 2-14 next year. Really? Really? So that's not a wasted year? I mean, come on. And who in their right fucking mind thinks we're really even going to be that much better next year? They would literally have to hit a home run on every single one of their picks and all of the guys that they pick up in free agency. They have to get every single decision correct. Not a single decision could be wrong. They could not fail or miscalculate anywhere. if they wanted to have that kind of a turnaround next year. And you also gotta hope that you don't fucking have injuries to any of those key guys. Any of them. Not a single one of them can go down with a season-ending injury. Or an injury that takes them out for substantial time. Like, it's mind-boggling. It's super mind-boggling to me how anybody could look at that and be like, yeah, man, that's something that we can easily overcome next year and we can be competitive But okay, dude, look, for y'all that think that, I'm sorry, I can't say anything. I can't say anything to you. You don't live in reality, and there is no getting through to you, because it's the most illogical thing ever. Let's be fair, he says. It's not Jerome Baker's fault or that of any 2019 Dolphins player. That is true. That this is the way Miami's leadership has chosen to sell their fans. And okay, so again, there he admits in his own article that, again, he said earlier, it is systemic and it is the Dolphins leadership. So that's Stephen Ross, Chris Greer, Marvin Allen, Reggie McKenzie, and Brian Flores. He is part of that leadership group. Okay, they have decided to do this, but it isn't the fans' fault either. No, it's not our fault. I agree with that, but we also don't have to support it. It's not incumbent upon us as fans to support it when it's clearly doing bad things for us, even, right now. And there is no legitimate proof or evidence or data to suggest that any of these hopes are going to come to fruition. They didn't ask for a tank season, but they did ask for a winner. Okay. Yes, we didn't ask for a tank season. That is absolutely correct. So why should we support it? And we did ask for a winner. Now. We'd like one now, but you're clearly not doing that. You're doing the exact opposite, clearly. And again, no guarantee for the future. And if a little short-term pain is the prescribed remedy by the decision makers in control of this organization, what choice do fans have other than buy into the hope they're being sold? Well, he's right. We don't have a choice because this is the decision that they've made. Again, we do not have to support it. But also, again, every single one of these is predicated off if. What if? What happens if this? Like, really? Like, really? You want your fucking team. You think it's smart for your team to just fucking, like, blindfold themselves and be like if you went to step up to bat and you blindfolded yourself and tied one hand behind your back. You could only swing with one hand and you can't see shit. Okay, but you go up and then you give it your best. You give it your best. And whatever happens, happens, man. And I mean, it's like, come on, people. Come on. And by the way, again, let's stop putting in these fucking ass clowns keep putting it in this perspective, a little short-term pain. Again, this is not going to be a one-year thing. We're going to suck for the next few years. Again, the closest example that we have is the Browns. They sucked for several years, for a lot of years, before they even got to this point where they are stacked with talent. And even stacked with talent, they're struggling immensely and are still several years away from not just achieving success, but achieving sustained success. Like, oh my God. So this rebuild, if it is eventually one day going to be successful, it's not going to be for years down the road. Again, the statistics. The average team that went 1-15 or 0-16. So out of all the teams the past like 20 years or whatever it is or so, or maybe since the merger, all the teams that lost 15 or more games in a season, on average, it took them 3.5 years to make it to the postseason. 3.5 years to make it to the postseason. On average, it took those same teams 7.5 years and counting, and still growing. 7.5, because there are still teams actively in this streak. We are actually one of them. So 7.5 years before any of those teams that lost 15 or more games in a season, before they won a playoff game. So what is your measure of success, right? Measure of success is sustained success, where we consistently get to the playoffs, but fight and push and compete for the Super Bowl. So if it takes 7.5 years on average and growing until you win a playoff game, I mean, Jesus fucking Christ. Come the fuck on, people. Who the fuck thinks, like, really, do you think Stephen Ross and Chris Greer are, and Brian Flores and the people that they brought in, do you really honestly think, I mean, even Reggie McKenzie and Marvin Allen, right? Yeah, they're respected and they got good, pedigrees and so on and so forth. But out of all of their resumes, do any of them really fucking have a resume that says they are just such a genius that they are gonna beat all of those averages in those time frames, and man, we are gonna be competing for a Super Bowl in the next couple years? Again, man, I mean, if you believe that, bro, I got nothing to fucking say to you, because that, you're super fucking irrational. Let's continue on. Believing in the plan makes you a good fan, even if it requires you to not believe in your team for 16 games. I mean, bruh. I mean, just that sentence alone is literally the dumbest fucking thing. Like, I mean, look, I know we live in a world of, like, lies, deceit, false reality, and all that bullshit, dude. And people are just, like, brazenly out there with their fucking contradictions and their hypocrisies and shit. But are you serious? Believing in the plan makes you a good fan, even if it requires you to not believe in your team for 16 games. I mean, what the fuck else do you say to that? That is literally the antithesis of competing and of being a fan. So that is essentially saying it's a good fan to be a bad fan. I mean, enough said, dude. Enough said on that. So that's how I feel. That's where I'm gonna, like, I'm not gonna have any more full-on discussions of what it means to be a real fan. I think you guys get the idea now, and I know, and there's a ton, old fans, young fans, that I talk to and stuff, that get it and that understand. And so, that's where my focus is. The people who are rational and logical thinking people, and who don't try and live off in this just absurd alternate reality. And so that's where I'm sticking, man. Because I can't even talk to the other people. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. So anyway, let me go ahead though. I want to let you guys know about the injury report. So it's not a very good, injury report, but let me go through it. So cornerback Johnson Batamosi and running back Kalen Ballage have been added to the injury report. Let's note though that Allen Hurns is out of the concussion protocol, and it's not a guarantee that he'll play Sunday, but I think it's likely, because I think a lot of these guys that I think you'll see are inactives come from the players that are on this injury report. But Kalen Ballage and cornerback Johnson Batamosi have been added. Johnson Batamosi with an ankle. He was limited on Thursday and Friday. He's questionable for the game. Running back Kalen Ballage with a foot injury was limited in practice only on Friday, questionable for the game. Guard tackle Jesse Davis with an elbow was limited all week, questionable for the game. Wide receiver Jakeem Grant, who's not actually expected to play. He's actually one of the ones probably projected to be out for the game with a hamstring. Limited all week, questionable for the game. Defensive end Charles Harris with a wrist. He was full all week and has no game time designation, so he's going to go. So don't worry about that. Obviously, Charles Harris will be available. Linebacker Trent Harris with a foot, limited all week, questionable. Cornerback Xavier Howard with a knee, limited all week, questionable game time designation. Now, questionable generally means they'll be available, but I am going to be super curious to see the inactive list going into this week. It is going to be super telling on a lot of fronts. Anyway, but that is, and if he does have a knee injury, then even minor, keeping him out would be smart. But I mean, obviously that makes our team monumentally worse. But you don't want him to have that kind of injury. Not a knee injury for a quarterback or a cornerback, man, because if he like tore an ACL or something, I mean, that's knock on wood, whatever you got to do, we cannot have that. But again, he's one major injury scare from completely buying out, especially if we keep losing and especially if we lose in embarrassing fashion. I don't think it's going to be that bad this week, but we'll see. It could be, though, if we end up, being without some of the only, really talented players that we have left. Safety Rashad Jones with an ankle, limited all week, questionable. Center Daniel Kilgore with a knee, full on Wednesday and Thursday, but limited Friday. No game time designation, so he's going to be available for sure. Cornerback Chris Lamons with a toe, limited all week, questionable. Safety Bobby McCain, hamstring and a shoulder, limited all week, questionable. I think it's probably likely he's one of the ones that you see out. I would be betting on that, actually. And like I said, I think that there's a substantial possibility that at some point he does end up on IR because of the shoulder. Hopefully not, but we'll see. I mean, honestly, if I'm keeping it real though, if it means his health and safety, then I hope so. If that's what's best for him and his health and everything and him for the long term, then I actually do hope he goes on IR. And especially because if he needs surgery, get that shit done, man. Don't be playing on that shit. Do not make it worse because you could shorten your career, and I do not want to see that happen to him. Running back Mark Walton with an illness. He was limited only on Wednesday. No game time designation, so that's not a big deal. He'll be available. Wide receiver Albert Wilson with a calf and a hip, limited all week, questionable. And cornerback Jamal Wiltz with a groin, limited all week, questionable. So if you look at that, Xavier Howard, Chris Lamons, well, Chris Lamons has a toe. But Jamal Wiltz with a groin, Rashad Jones with an ankle, Johnson Batamosi with an ankle, Xavier Howard with a knee. All of our defensive backs that are Bobby McCain with a hamstring and a shoulder. All injuries that are terrible for their positions. And if they got worse and required some sort of surgery, then could be absolutely catastrophic. I mean, what do you have there? ACL injuries. You have shoulder reconstructive surgery with Bobby McCain. Groin. I mean, if you tear your groin in Jamal Wiltz's case and has to have groin surgery, that's a big one. Ankle. Possible ankle injury would be like, an Achilles tear maybe. All major time big injuries, especially for those positions. So if they do come in and play, there is a substantial risk that they could further injure them, those injuries and just, I mean, I don't even really want to get into the possibilities because I don't want to see that happen to any of those guys. But unfortunately, that's what they're being, told to do. They're being told to go out there and fucking risk your health and your well-being, risk your careers, and so on and so forth. Even Xavier Howard, that's why his contract doesn't really mean anything. One, the team made it perfectly tradable to other teams if they found a suitor willing to give up some more hopes and dreams for them, but also because Xavier Howard recognizes, man, this shit might not be worth it. The prime years of my career for this mess, man. And, I'm one injury away from, I mean, even his contract could be in some ways, in jeopardy, with an injury and so on and so forth. So, I mean, because then he might, if he did end up, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. A lot of them are not good. So, I don't really want to get into that. But so I wanted to also share with you guys the injury report. And it is, I mean, we'll have to see, man. That's a lot of guys that are questionable. I mean, again, generally that means they'll play, but they're super banged up, and a lot of them, especially the most talented veterans and so on and so forth on our team, some of the guys like Xavier Howard that are supposed to be pillars of this team for the future, we're pushing them to brinks that they don't need to be pushed to, man. And it's setting ourselves up for even more catastrophic, devastating ramifications down the road, especially with those guys on defense. If they're going to have to continue to play a lot of these games just heavily on the field, spending most of their time on the field, it's not going to get any better, and it's going to get a lot worse. And I'm getting concerned, really concerned for the health of these players. So anyway, that's all I got for you. This video is definitely long enough. I said my piece on the whole fandom thing. And like I said, that's the last time I'm going to have a full out, discussion on it. Because I said my piece and it doesn't need any more attention than that. I think I made it pretty clear. So in future videos, there may be some passing comment about it, but, no elaborate explanations. And then, like I said, I wanted to take a look at that injury situation and kind of, so look, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of, let's just, again, at this point, it's one game at a time, and I'm just going to let the facts speak for themselves. I've been proven wrong on a couple things. Again, like I said, I thought maybe the Jets were going to do really well this season, but they've had the quarterback injuries and so on and so forth, and they've had their struggles. They signed some big free agents in the offseason, spent big money before Gase got there. Gase didn't, he wasn't happy with that, but he had to deal with it because that's what he came into. Whatever. And then they've been bit at some super important positions, most notably the quarterback position, by the injury bug. So, I was wrong about that. I was wrong when I said that I think the Chargers were going to have a big uptick in their defensive statistics. They did start having an uptick in the second half of the game, but we held them off for the first half, so I was wrong about that overall, right? I'm wrong sometimes, but for the most part, thus far, I have been proven correct in my assertions and predictions, and so we'll see, man. We'll see how it goes. I hope, there is still 12 more games for them to turn it around, at least to the point to where we're not historically bad. I didn't even think we were going to be historically bad to this level going into this season, but, so we'll see how it goes, man. Hopefully we can get a win somewhere. Hopefully we can take advantage of one of these weaker teams and get a win somewhere. I'm not convinced. They have to prove it to me before I'll be convinced, because all the data points to the contrary. So, we'll see, but I hope we can get a win somewhere. I don't give a fuck. I truly don't give a fuck about that number one pick, because it's not where you pick, it's how you pick, and so on and so forth. So, but anyway, like I said, one game at a time. That's all I got for you guys right now. I'm definitely, I am excited for more Dolphins football, even though I expect it to be, another difficult game to watch. But we'll see. Who knows? Like I said, maybe they'll surprise me. We'll see. But at the end of the day, man, one way or another, God damn it, we will get this fixed, and I'm not gonna stop. The best thing that I can do to be, an activist in this fight is to keep speaking out and to keep the conversation going, to keep pointing out the things that other people are afraid to point out, and just keep giving you guys all the facts the different perspectives and all of that, and the best evaluation that I possibly can based off of the facts and with applied logic, and let you guys make up your minds for yourselves. And again, I think that the core of the problem is Stephen Ross, and he needs to sell the team. And so that's why, again, I'll mention it really quick. I did start the petition to get Stephen Ross to sell the team. So whether it's now or whether it's, 2 years down the road, when a lot of these idiots that support this shit now have jumped ship and bailed when they realize that it's going to be a massive failure and this was all for nothing, I don't care, man. We need to get Stephen Ross to sell the team. So whenever you're ready to sign it, man, sign that petition. Let's grow it, because that's about all we can do as fans. If we really want to try and be involved and, try and affect some positive change, all we can do is speak up, speak out. And, and the one particular example, since I think personally that Stephen Ross is the head of that fish, and it's rotting from him down, the only thing we could possibly do in that regard is get a people-powered, movement to get him to sell the team and give somebody else a chance and a shot at it. Because clearly what he's done and is doing is not working. So, whatever. Whenever, like I said, whenever you're ready, whether you're ready now or if it takes you another 2 miserable years or whatever, however long it takes, whenever you're ready, jump in on that. Let's do it together, and let's make some change in the team that we love and show that we are true fans and that we truly want what's best for this team, and that we do not have to accept this massively self-destructive, chaotic mess of a failure in the meantime. Anyway, so with that, guys, I'm gonna get up out of here. I hope you guys enjoy my videos. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.